Welcome everyone to another episode of the Will and Rock MMA podcast.
What's going on, everybody? Let's just shoot straight to some UFC news. We got Pablo Costa gets injured for UFC on ESPN 3. Jacare takes over to fight Joel Romero. So now, if we take into consideration, this is actually the second fight they're going up against each other. And to top it off, Joel Romero ended up beating Jacare in unanimous decision.
Right.
This fight, to me, means the world to Joel, because Joel's already on. I would like to think that with his age, you would think that he'll be on his way out. And it almost seems like there's going to be that one fight where it's going to hit him in the face that he's like 42 years old.
Yeah.
Jacare, on the other hand, hasn't looked his best. Which, when he first came into the UFC, he went on a bit of a tear. And I literally said, to quote me and everything, that Jacare was going to be a champion. Jacare hasn't been looking like himself. I don't know if USADA have anything to do with steroids or anything. I'm not 100% sure what's going on. He comes off a lot of injuries as well.
We have to take a consideration. Both fighters are older. They've been in the game for a pretty long time. I mean, Joel Romero, for example, he fought in the Olympics from Cuba in judo, so he's been doing it for a long time. Jacare has been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for the longest time. These people get injured constantly. They've been putting so much pressure on their bodies for so many years. We're starting to see that. That's the repercussion of what you're getting, right? Not the best performances from these fighters. Joel Romero still looks like a badass, going into the octagon every single time. Jacare is a little more technical. He's come around a little more technical now because you could tell that he's getting older, so he's not using a stand-up game as much as he is also his grappling. He's mixing it a lot more now, right? So that's what makes this fight very interesting. A great match for both Joel and for Jacare for their careers. Like you said, although Joel Romero did take it by unanimous decision last time, and Jacare knowing this and taking this fight with Joel Romero is what Jacare is going to get into the octagon against Joel Romero. It's going to be a very interesting fight. That's what makes this fight. There's history behind these two fighters.
There's definitely history. There's a lot of history between these two fighters. They fought for many years. Next fight we're going to discuss BJ Penn versus Clay Guida. That's May 11th in Brazil for UFC 237. What is left of BJ? I could tell you when he lost to Ryan Hall, I thought this was the ending of BJ. The way he lost to me, I listened to Joe Rogan last week. He's talking about how BJ Penn looks so prepared. He looks so good going into the octagon, and it's sad that he got caught. But a lot of that has to do with the reflexes of somebody at that age being able to get caught in a submission, especially when he's a black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fighter.
Yep.
So that knowing that he's going up against a Jiu-Jitsu guy, it's like the UFC keeps handing him like fights like, dude, you're a black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're going to put you on against somebody a black belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, see what you can do with them. Now they decided to put Clay Guida on because maybe they want to see a different side of BJ Penn, which is the stand-up fighter, the war fighter who goes into the deeper rounds and figures out a way to win. Problem is, Clay Guida is a ball of energy, and if anybody does not know how to go into the later rounds as of late, it has to be BJ Penn. This is an extremely challenging fight. Depending on how Clay Guida wins, if he decides to win this fight or if he wins this fight, puts him back in contention to continue to put up good fights.
Yeah.
If BJ loses this fight, man, just hang it up. If you win, hang it up. Mm-hmm. You going out on top. It seems like a lot of these fighters now are trying to retire a little bit younger to end up on top. So really even though I'm looking forward for this fight, I really hope that BJ sees the light, whether a win or a loss.
I would have to agree with you. Back to what we said about both Joel Romero and Jacare. These are two older fighters. Both Clay Guida has been fighting for a very long time, and so has BJ Penn. BJ Penn coming off that loss, and we did say I want to see BJ Penn win this fight. However, if he loses, especially by submission against a guy like Hall, it's time for you to hang it up, because what you were known for, now you're getting caught in it, right? So, but like you're mentioning what Joe Rogan said, is that he started out pretty well. He looked very well on his feet. He was moving around pretty well, this and that, and he just happens to get caught. A younger fighter, a hungrier fighter, and definitely at this point in his career, one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners that's on this roster. So we have to take that in consideration. A guy like Clay Guida, who's, like you said, a ball of energy, who could wrestle, that's BJ Penn's scariest opponents every single time. Look what George St. Pierre did to him. They just grind him out, and then he doesn't show up for the third round because he's too tired. So the question is Clay Guida going to implement that same game plan where he's going to come in and wrestle BJ Penn? And how could BJ Penn keep this on the feet, which would profit BJ Penn, right? So it's something that we have to, look into. Is a toss-up, if you ask me. I wish, either fighter, I don't want either one of them to lose. But you're right. If BJ Penn wins or loses, it'll be nice for him to hang it up at this point.
All right. So next thing, finally, we have Anthony Smith on really short break after taking the loss to John Jones in the last UFC pay-per-view event, which was a complete dominance by John Jones. There were some controversial things that happened within the fight. However, Jones ended up taking the victory. Anthony Smith shows you the type of heart and trooper of a fighter he is, going up against, by far, one of the most dangerous person in that weight class, which is Alexander Gustafsson. We all know these two are the two that have been beaten by John Jones. I'm curious, putting these two guys together, do these guys become first contenders once again to fight John Jones? I don't know if I want to see that. Yeah. I don't know, as a consumer, to watching a pay-per-view event, if I really want to spend that money on that. So I'm curious if at this point the UFC is really trying to push for John Jones to take a big fight, a super fight, the Brock Lesnar's, really pushing for Daniel Cormier to come back and try to fight him. Something that's going to make sense. I would, if anybody could listen to me in the UFC, put Stipe up against John Jones. Make John Jones go up to heavyweight and keep fucking Stipe busy, because you're pretty much benching this guy and he has not fought. There's a lot of fighters in the UFC that should be on the rotation a lot faster, and Stipe isn't. With that being said, Anthony Smith versus Alexander Gustafsson. It's going to be on UFC Plus 10 on Stockholm, Sweden. I think June 1st, if I'm not mistaken. That right there, my friends, is a phenomenal fight.
Absolutely.
For fight fans.
It's great for the #1 contender for the UFC lightweight champion.
Is it really?
Well, you kind of have to remember, this is a guy that was fought against John Jones, the best fighter to ever grace the octagon, and he got completely dominated, although he did throw some punches that might have landed, but nothing that ever hurt John Jones. I was actually watching it on the ESPN app, not the actual fight. They have this really cool thing where they show both fighters, and let's say John Jones would punch Anthony Smith in the face. Anthony Smith's face will turn red.
Yeah.
And I was just watching the counter strikes and everything, and all I could see is
Anthony Smith going,
he's blowing up. Yeah, he's like a Christmas tree. Like, I was like, holy crap. And John Jones' numbers were just going up. I was like, holy crap, this guy's putting a whooping on him. And then later on, coming to find out that he beat him by decision, but completely dismantled him, Nobody's going to take John Jones' belts. Let's just be honest about that. I agree with you 100%. Let's get John Jones to go up, have him fight Stipe, and then have the other guys battle it out to see who's going to get the light heavyweight champion, because John Jones is not giving up that belt.
But it's a great thing. UFC is standing on a money platter. If they decide to continue rotating John Jones to heavyweights, that's not affecting him as a fighter as much.
No, not at all.
We're not doing drastic weight cuts. He either walks as a heavyweight or he has to just make weight to make light heavyweight. I think this is the perfect opportunity for the UFC to really give John Jones a super fight now, because he's like a Conor, right? Like, who else is going to put? He swept that weight class. And granted, there's so many great fighters in the lightweight division. They're stacked, completely stacked. Let them fight it out and let somebody get some sort of spark to be like, okay, maybe he's ready for John Jones, or maybe this new fighter coming up should definitely be able to at least give John Jones competition. Give John Jones a heavyweight fight next. That's just my theory. There's a lot of fights out there for the heavyweight division for him. And if Cormier is not going to wait around to fight Brock Lesnar, put him up against Jones again, man. Like, let's get the ball rolling. These guys are not getting any younger.
I agree, brother. Let's get started with this UFC card.
All right, so UFC on ESPN +5 on London, England, which is a pretty good card. I highly recommend.
This Saturday.
It's definitely happening this Saturday. We have Jack Marshman versus John Phillips.
Yeah. Now, both fighters I'm not too aware of, to be honest. I'm gonna have to toss it up, just because we normally pick somebody. I'm gonna pick Marshman to take this fighting decision.
And because I'm not familiar with the fighters myself, I got John Phillips winning the next fight. So, winning that fight as well. Next fight we got Danny Roberts versus Claudio Silva.
So I'm gonna have to. Again, these are normally when they do international fights, the first two people in the main card are fighters that had one or two fights and they want to really broadcast them, especially in their hometown. So because of that, I'm not picking the Brazilian fighter Silva. I'm picking
Danny Roberts.
Sorry, Danny Roberts, and I'm going for him. But that's the reason why we really don't know about these fighters, because they are on their grind.
Right, Claudio Silva is who I'm going for. Once again, just to go against you. Next fight we got Jose Gutierrez versus Natalia Wood.
Again, unfortunately, not familiar with these fighters as well. I'll go with Claudio.
The next fight, finally, we got some good names. We got Volkan Ozdemir versus Dominic Reyes.
Now, this is a very interesting fight. And going back to this light heavyweight division,
heavy hitters, man.
Very heavy hitters. They could stop the show in the first round or second round. Think Reyes, he's about like 7 foot tall. The guy is a really tall guy. I believe that Reyes is going to outscore him, and I think that Reyes is actually going to get this fight. And a lot of people are doubting Reyes versus Ozdemir, because Ozdemir is a beast, and I'm not taking anything away from him.
Going into this fight, Ozdemir is a bigger name.
Right.
I do believe, because of where they're fighting, I do believe Volkan will pull a victory on. I think Volkan is actually a better rounded fighter than Reyes is. But like you said, height and maybe even a reach might be a big factor in this fight. If Volkan stays close, his veteran ways will definitely get this W for sure.
I would have to agree with you if he decides to keep it close, because Reyes' reach might pull him off with a victory with a decision win.
Yeah, and then we have somebody who's in a massive winning streak, Leon Edwards, fighting versus Gunnar Nelson, which is another hell of a fighter, man.
The question is Gunnar Nelson going to take him down? Is he planning on standing up with him? I don't see Leon Edwards surviving once he hits the ground, but I see him knocking out Gunnar Nelson if they stay standing up. So the question is not so much about Leonard stand-up game, because it's there. It's whether or not Gunnar Nelson's going to go in with a wrestling tactic to bring him down and submit him. And I believe he could do that, and I'm going to go for Gunnar Nelson. I expect a submission in the fight. What round? I'm not 100% sure, but I smell a submission.
As much as I think Leon Edwards is an absolute beast, and he's been on an absolute tear as of late, I think Gunnar Nelson's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and also his level of stand-up has improved a ton. But I think the main thing is how accurate he is at bringing you down. Is Leon Edwards going to be able to sustain staying on his feet, and for how long? Distance is going to play key for Leon Edwards at this point. I do see Gunnar Nelson winning this by submission myself. And also I'm just a bigger fan of Gunnar. Gunnar has really come a long way to where he is now, and for him to continue grinding and perform at that level is really impressive. So I'm going Gunnar Nelson on this one as well. Next but not least, the main event, Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal.
Yeah. Now, this is a really interesting fight because the applications for it is pretty high, right? You have Usman, who just won the title versus Tyron Woodley. And now we have what I would consider two of the next opponents for Usman, whether it's Till or Masvidal. Both coming off wins. It's such a hard fight because none of them are going to the ground. Let's be honest. Darren Till lasted for like a few seconds on the ground before he got submitted by Tyron Woodley. How much his game has improved is redundant because he doesn't want to hit the ground. Masvidal is known for his stand-up game, but so is Darren Till, and Darren Till's hands are a lot heavier than Masvidal. But could Masvidal put them together better? I believe so. I believe that Masvidal either wins by decision or Darren Till stops him in the first or second round by ref stoppage. So to pick one over the other, I'm gonna have to go with Darren Till. I believe he has stronger hands and will end the fight in the second round.
So statistically, I looked into it. Jorge Masvidal is either he leads the UFC. Is he the first or second in the most significant strikes thrown? And then you look at Darren Till. Darren Till, the way he dismantled, like the last image I have of Darren Till is how he dismantled Cerrone, right? Completely dismantle him, and we're talking about a stand-up fighter. But also, it's one of those things. Did Cerrone deserve to be in that weight class?
Yeah, I was about to mention
that's a toss-up because the amount of power that Till was bringing into the table, you could totally see the impact that it happened.
Right, but it's important to note that this is what happens when you put somebody that is that good at the stand-up game and is bigger than his opponent.
Yeah,
perfect example. Sorry,
no, I totally agree. Absolutely. I think this fight is going to be a stand-up war. I as much as I think Darren Till has the upper hand in this fight. Not only is he fighting somewhere that's somewhat close to home, but most importantly, I think he's the bigger guy. Even on the weigh-ins, he just looked bigger, and I think he's the heavier puncher. I will say that you talked about how Woodley submitted him. Don't forget that Woodley hit him several times to get him there. I think Jorge Masvidal, his power, his speed, and his stand-up game is so good. Just for the shits of it, I'm going for Masvidal. And not to say that the Masvidal is not going to win this fight, and I'm just picking him just to pick him. I think Masvidal has a really good chance, and I think it's time for him. You know, Darren Till's still pretty young. Darren Till could take another loss depending on the loss is and still climb his way up. The Jorge Masvidal's been doing this for a long time, has fought big names. It's time for him to take a big victory. I'm going Masvidal on this.
Okay, Masvidal what?
Masvidal, it has to go in the later rounds. I would say if it is, it'll be TKO.
Oof, I don't see that happening.
Or ref stoppage. Going into the second or third round, I think they're going to test each other in the first round. I think the first round is going to be a very boring round. My personal opinion. We'll see what happens. I got Masvidal winning third or second round TKO.
All right. So that wraps it up for us on this episode. We'll see you guys next week, same time. Don't miss this Saturday fights. Darren Till versus Masvidal is going to be a hell of a card, and we'll see you guys next week. Peace,
guys.